Hey, it's Ben. Just kind of putting this all together late morning. For some time, I've needed to create this video and an article about how Qigong practice can accelerate your healing from a breakup, divorce, and other kinds of devastating losses. I'm joined today by Mahi here. Obviously, dog children are the best. And she has her little friend here, Barney the dinosaur. so, so I'll let her down. But anyway, let's see. Going back, when was this? 2000. I forget what year now. But 20 or so years ago, I began to, I went through a few too many mugging attempts. And last time it happened, I whipped out pepper spray, chased the asshole down the street. And we ended up doing this kind of number. He ran behind a car and we were running back and forth. And so, after some time, I just said, forget it. And I just started walking and I had intended to stop by a print shop, and I ducked in the print shop and I see a few police officers running by and all of a sudden they double back and then they're in the print shop and they have me up against the wall. And and because I had pepper spray, I came about this close to going to jail. And so I just said to the officer who nearly arrested me, or one of the three, what am I supposed to do? Just get beaten up because some trash thinks he's going to mug me? And the officer says to me, like, this is New York. You have to get used to it. And unfortunately, New York is one of the states that looks out for the person who's perpetrating crimes as opposed to the person who would be the unfortunate recipient of that violence or whatever. But so I was thinking to myself, like, okay, I'm going to find the most ruthless Chinese master I could find to train with. And next time that happens, I will paralyze the son of a bitch. And of course, I didn't say that out loud, but thankfully I didn't get arrested there. But so within, I ended up going to Chinatown. They had several martial arts supply stores, and there was this whole rack of flyers, and I asked the person working in the store that evening who recommended it. He just pointed to that rack, and I left with this whole stack of flyers, and there was one that was in this kind of dingy yellow color, and the English writing on it wasn't very good. But as I was reading through it, I just had an intuitive sense. It's like, okay, this is the person I'm going to train with. And I went down to the studio a few nights later and got started. And so when I began to train with Shifu Li Tailiang, he was teaching me various forms and fighting applications and all. But along the way, he began to show me various Qigong practices. And as Qigong practices, or some of them are stationary, you're still, and others involve some movement, but very gradual or graceful movement. And so at the time, not knowing any better, being grossly ignorant, I was thinking to myself, why are you teaching me meditation practices? I need to learn to rip someone's head off. And but he was calmly persistent, and Shifu didn't really speak all that much English, especially not back then. And he's learned more over time, but he's still not that adept in English. And yeah, so he persisted, but I still didn't take it quite as seriously. But after some time, I was in India and I met up with a friend that, someone that I'd worked with as well that I hadn't seen in a couple of years. And so while he was in India, he started learning Kundalini, pranayama kinds of practices. And I remember looking into his aura, scanning his physical and subtle bodies, and it's like, damn, what have you been doing? I was shocked. I could see like all this presence or life force in and around his body and what they call the chakras. I could see how they had developed considerably, and I knew that there is a relation between qigong and pranayama, and so I thought, wow, maybe I better be taking this stuff more seriously. And so when I got back to New York and was training again with Shifu, I actually started doing the Qigong practices. And at first, a little more slowly, but it didn't take me that long. I was doing an hour, 2 hours a day. And he started teaching me more simplistic practices. But once he saw that I was actually doing the practices, he would teach me more and more. And practices became increasingly complex. and some of them are actually, even though you're either standing, or some you might actually be in like certain kinds of squat positions, but you do these practices over and over. You keep doing these repetitions, and the more you do the practice, the stronger it gets. When I first began to do the practices, I didn't feel much of anything, just a little calmer, more relaxed. But as I continued to do the practices, plural, I began to feel all kinds of, tingling, electrical sensations, heat in my body. And as the months went by, and as you keep doing this practice, you start building this internal power. In the Chinese systems, there are these, in different esoteric systems, there's something they refer to as subtle anatomy. In India, China, and some other cultures, they refer to the chakras, which are these like vortices that correlate with the various internal organs and systems, and have to do with various functions of your mind and your emotions and your ability to function in life. And in these various esoteric traditions, you find in India, for instance, there's all kinds of very highly complex, very sophisticated practices to facilitate the development thereof of the body and mind, to attain this higher levels of spiritual awareness. In China, in the Taoist systems, and there was a lot of exchange between India and people in India and China and other parts of Asia. And at the same time, there are also various lineages. The lineage could be like somebody who attained mastery, say, within a yogic tradition, and the Taoist systems. And so there were certain practices that, where there was this exchange that went back and forth throughout Asia. But there are also, within these lineages, they took off in different directions. They kept refining these practices and gaining a lot of insight and understanding. And so you had individuals that attained or developed various kinds of spiritual gifts, and maybe gifts of healing. And in China, where there's more of the emphasis on the martial arts, and a lot of this practice, or these practices, were utilized so that one could develop this internal power, and you'd continue to do these practices for hours a day, continually building and building the force or the power within these dantians. The dantians are these other, again, subtle anatomy, these other, like they say, internal organs, in a sense, on a subtle level, where you continue to concentrate and build this power. And most people who have any familiarity with these systems at all, or have heard of the dantian in the lower abdomen, which is located a few inches below the navel, kind of internal there. But there are two more, one at the base of the sternum and also one at the brow. And so as I'd be doing these practices and drawing in that chi or life force into my body and building it or concentrating it, and I would be training with Shifu. And sometimes maybe you throw a punch at me or something, I was supposed to deflect it. And sometimes, you deflect and you simultaneously, you're deflecting and striking. And, as I'd strike him, he'd feel this jolt of electricity. He would kind of like staring at me, like he didn't expect me to develop that quickly. But because I've also trained with a traditional Native American doctor and, carry that transmission, these healing gifts, and I do hours of meditation practice, I had a head start. So I was able to build up faster than other students were. And these individuals who attain mastery, again, they're doing practice, from childhood in many instances, and hours a day. And as they continue to practice, that power gets stronger and stronger. And so you have some that were so powerful that, say, if someone tried to attack them, they would deflect that force or direct it back into the body of the attacker, and it would cause damage in the internal organs. Or maybe if they could use that power and literally, and you could see videos on YouTube of people doing this and just send the person flying across the room. Or if that master strikes somebody and, if they were just what they call external martial arts, and it's just the technique, of the various punching, kicking, striking, all that. And it's just all muscle and speed and reflex and everything. And there are limits to that. But with this internal power, you can just keep building it. So you'd have some of these masters where they would strike somebody, and the force, the power was so great that it would break bones or rupture internal organs. Of course, these individuals didn't go looking for a fight. If anything, they knew what they could do, and they weren't out to impress anybody. So they would tend to de-escalate the conflicts and all. But so I kept practicing, and I have for quite a few years now. And but in, in 2008, I think, when I was in Sri Lanka, I was on a flight, and I met this woman, and we connected pretty quickly. And it was intense. I mean, it was just so passionate. But, as the months went by, I began to realize that there is this intense physical chemistry. But on the other hand, intellectually, we weren't quite on the same level. And it got kind of frustrating at times because in a lot of ways, I didn't feel I could really engage with her emotionally, intellectually. And but again, there was that physicality of it. And yet still there was a connection of sorts. But on the other hand, there was also problems with her family. Namely, her mom was extremely controlling, narcissistic, and I just decided immediately that she didn't like me. But I remember at one point when this woman and I were in India, and we got into a car crash. And one of those three-wheel taxis, we crashed into the back of a lorry, because in Bangalore, those three-wheel taxi drivers, they're like kamikazes. And so the three-wheel taxi kind of reared up, and then it ended up on its side, and her leg was pinned underneath. She had this puncture wound. I carried her into the medical clinic, and I literally just fainted. I passed out. And there was this, thought quickly, that did I, unbeknownst to me, enter my head or something? But, fortunately I was okay. But my then girlfriend, she had this puncture wound, and so the doctor stitched her up. The doctor was rather incompetent. He used like these supposed to be dissolving stitches, and they weren't. And later they had to dig them out of her leg, and her leg swelled up. It was infected. It was a big mess, But anyway, when we got back to India, and my then girlfriend's mother said to her something like, "God is punishing you." But horrible thing to say to your own child. But in any case, it wasn't long before she started turning the family against us. And so her cousins, her aunties, her uncles, everything, and there was just so much pressure on her. And it really wasn't sustainable to me to, at the time, to take that much time off of work, and to all the expense of flying to Sri Lanka and staying there as much time as I was. And it takes a lot to keep the practice going, especially as time has gone on, and people are more and more distracted with their smartphones and social media and all that. But yeah, so is because of that, the relationship came to an end. Is that came unraveled, and that was devastating when it happened. And and right around that time too, there are a number of things happened. There was a breakup that I went through, and also that's when the banksters, with their risky financial practices, Bear Stearns and Goldman Sachs, and crashed the economy. And so it's like financially, the bottom was falling out from under me. I was just thinking like, okay, I'll start to put myself back together after this breakup. And so there was, on one hand, the devastation emotionally, and then the financial crash happening right around the same time. The breakup happened first. But I was just in enormous pain when that happened. And that was, and despite the differences, up to that time, that was one of the closest relationships that I'd ever experienced. And in addition to, when you go through a breakup, you experience the immediate grief, and all the other painful emotions pertaining to what's happening then and there as you're going through that breakup. But it also precipitates the emergence of all the other grief and sadness and hurt and loss and anger and the whole range of emotions that you're holding in your body from this whole history of everything you've gone through over the years. And the pain was enormous. And so, as I had done many times previously, I just instinctually just dived into the pain, and I would go so deep into the depth of all that sadness and grief, and all the other emotions I was feeling, and I would just immerse myself in the depths of those feelings and just be breathing very softly, very deeply. And I would continue to do that for hours. and and then, in the spring and fall, right on schedule, I would return to the Wichita Mountains. I would go to the Vision Quest. That's where I go out to fast the 4 days and nights without food and water. And every time I'd go, I could feel like it just taking that pain down. Like it would just drop, a big level. And then months later, I'd go again and it would go down that much more. But when I was in the midst of it, especially, during that first 6 months to a year, and I would say that was one of the longest of any relationships that it took me to get over. But again, I'd be breathing into those painful emotions, but that can be really hard on your body. These kinds of emotions, they don't process, or they're not, you're not able to digest them very easily. And a lot of people, what happens is they just shut down, they kind of numb out around these emotions. They can have, when you're in the midst of it, you're in that acute phase. Yeah, they're extraordinarily painful. But as time goes on, there's a dulling, there's a lessening of the pain, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have processed those emotions. And many people don't. What happens is there's that numbing and they just settle into the body, and people carry those emotions indefinitely. And so as you go forward into life, what happens is there are these barriers. The emotions that you don't process create barriers, and it makes it difficult to trust, to open up, to open to connecting with another individual. Often there's the fear of getting hurt again, or maybe as you go down the road, you meet someone else and you connect, and it triggers you. Your partner says or does something, and it elicits or evokes painful emotions that you haven't processed from your previous relationship or a relationship a few back. And so we continue to hold these emotions in our bodies. And so when I was in that acute phase of the breakup, as I said, I would dive into the pain. I would just keep breathing. But what I have found personally, and also what I've observed with other people that I've known, that I've worked with over the years, is that these emotions, sadness, the grief, the hurt, the anger, the feelings of betrayal, all that, it can be very hard on the body. I mean, it's it's a wear and tear as we experience these kinds of painful emotions, especially when they're unrelenting and it continues for weeks and months, and some people it drags on for years. But as I said, a few years prior, I had started training with Shifu Li Tailiang, this master from China. And so in addition to breathing from the depth of the pain, I also started doing the Qigong practices. So on one hand, I'd take time and I'd breathe into all these emotions from the depth of them, and it would really help to process them. But at a certain point, I would just switch over and I would just start doing Qigong practices. The advantage of working with the Qigong practices is that when you're working with Qigong practices, you're drawing the life force around and about you. And especially when you can go outdoors and you're in a natural setting, you're away from the city, or at least in a part of the city that's not so populated. And you draw that life force into your body. In the sciences, they say that solidity, in whatever objects, here's the teacup. They say the solidity is an illusion. I mean, to me, it seems pretty hard. If I was to throw this at somebody, it would hurt, obviously. But they say that in any case, the protons and electrons and neutrons are buzzing or spinning around. And but in any case, in various parts of Asia, like in China and India and so on, they would say that there are these charged particles of life force that fill the atmosphere. In India, they call it prana. In China, they call it qi, and I'm not sure what they call it in other cultures. But they'd say that through intention, you can, with your intention, you can draw this life force into your body. And I think most of you are familiar with acupuncture, at least you know what it is. And acupuncture utilizes what they call this system of meridians, and there are these points located along the meridians, and each of these points correspond, the points and the meridians correspond with various organs and systems of the body. And so in India and in China, there are these various pathways throughout the body and mind. And these people, being highly sensitive and perceptive, they were able to observe these pathways and, what they call the subtle anatomy, the chakras, the dantians, and they could see the correlation between these, again, the subtle anatomy, the pathways, the internal organs, and so they developed these elaborate systems by which they would treat people. Again, acupuncture, Qigong was used for healing, and they were moving the life force through the body. But when you're doing these, when you're practicing Qigong yourself, and what you do is through intention, you're drawing this life force in through various pathways or through various openings within various parts of your body, and then cycling it through the pathways. For instance, in various yogic practices, they're drawing the life force up the spine, and in doing so, it precipitates the freeing up or the release of the kundalini or the life force, and that again facilitates the awakening of what they call the chakras and this higher level of awareness, or what they call enlightenment. And in Qigong practices, instead of just drawing the force just straight up the spine, you do bring it up the spine, but you also over the top of your head and back down the front of your body. And so you're running the qi or life force through these channels. And this channel that goes up the spine and down the front, that's referred to as the microcosmic orbit. And so they will do these practices where, and there's different variations thereof, where they're continually cycling the qi or life force up the spine and then over and down the front. And they'll do hundreds and hundreds of repetitions. And there are other doorways, there are other pathways through which they would cycle the qi or life force. But what I found that, as I said, sometimes they would dive into the depth of the painful emotions, and we need to do that too. It's important that we don't just only do Qigong practice like, oh, I feel better, I'm not feeling the pain anymore, because I know some people who have used Qigong, for instance, and you can use it to disconnect emotionally, and those emotions aren't going to go away. They're going to be trapped in your body, and all that additional qi power will actually amplify the emotions. So you're more likely to act them out and do stupid things to hurt yourself and hurt other people. It can fuel addictions, all that. And that's a bad thing. It's destructive to yourself and other people. But when you work with your emotions, as I teach you to do in other videos, and then sometimes you need a little break from all those painful emotions, as I did, and I would flip over and I would start doing Qigong practices. I do, for instance, the microscopic orbit and other practices where I would be bringing the Qi or life force through other pathways. And what I found is that that life force that I draw into my body, it has a more neutral quality. And it was these charged particles of life force. And I would feel more energized, I'd feel calmer, and it would help to mitigate all those painful emotions, make them more bearable, more manageable. And so again, I was calmer, I was more grounded, and it just didn't hurt so damn bad. So I do teach these Qigong practices individually. I could teach them over Zoom or Skype or WhatsApp, whatever. I teach them in person. So if you'd like to learn, do feel free to reach out to me. Teaching a number of practices for the online course that I'm creating called Heal My Heartbreak. And well, anyway, but this is, I just wanted to give just the introductory video on this. Also, in various cities across the country, there's also, various teachers. And there are very different styles of Qigong that you can learn that a lot of the Qigong practices that are taught are more, there are practices that are more, I guess you'd say, widely taught. These various systems. The practices I learned, many of them have more fighting or combat applications. There are specific practices that are more for one's healing or spiritual development. There are more esoteric practices that are not so widely shared. I can teach them individually as I work with people, but these are practices that you probably wouldn't find, or you're not going to find. I would say the vast majority of Qigong practitioners, Tai Chi or Qigong practitioners, do not know a lot of these practices. The fact that I spent, over 17 years training with Shifu, he passed on quite a few of these practices to me. So, and again, Qigong has many, many benefits. As you work with these practices, they help to draw more life force into your body. They nourish the various internal organs. They help to create a balance in the internal organs and systems. They, and doing so, they could facilitate healing within the body and mind. There are Qigong practitioners who specifically, and you see a lot of this in China, that their primary focus is facilitating healing within people's bodies and minds. And some of these practitioners work in the hospitals in China, work in conjunction with acupuncturists and surgeons and all. There's Qigong practices that are utilized primarily for developing this internal power that is used in fighting or combat in the martial arts. In the Taoist systems, there's the Qigong practices that are used to evolve spiritually. And there is overlap, by the way. So if you do any of these forms of practices, they will have, so if you're doing the martial arts practices, they could actually cross over and help to facilitate healing or to facilitate your spiritual interpersonal development. So it's a vast system, and there are so many practitioners, different lineages over thousands of years now. And so it's like biology, it is infinite. And So I continue to practice. I encourage you to learn. I can, if there are people in your local area, I can teach you as well. So do reach out to me if I could be of assistance. If, again, as I said, if you're going through breakup, experiencing any other kind of devastating loss, the death of a loved one, if you're getting jerked around emotionally, you're wanting to be in a relationship and somebody's stringing you along, working with the Qigong helps to mitigate. You still need to work with the painful emotions, dive into the depth of them, breathe softly and deeply, digest these emotions, make use of therapeutic interventions, deep tissue body work, with gifted healers such as myself, or you might even go on a vision quest or something. So breathe into the emotions, digest them, work with the interventions, but you could also incorporate Qigong practices. It gives you a whole additional set of tools that will facilitate your healing, but also your continued spiritual and personal development. So I'll leave you with that for today. Bye now.